Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. This is the cold, snowy, and wind chill live stream for this week. It's good to see you all here. Hope you're all doing well. Apologies for the change in address for the link, or the link for the live stream. When I did my testing last night, YouTube had set the stream that was scheduled for today to auto start when I started sending my stream from my encoder. So it used up that stream and I couldn't use it again today. Apologies for that. So looks you're the lucky few here, it looks like, that found the new one. So welcome. All right, let's jump on over to our agenda and we'll take a look at what we have going today. First up, this is a workshop. As a reminder, this is part of the Learn Light and Sound School over at school.learnlightandsound.com. We originally set these sessions up as a place for people to ask questions who have signed up for the courses over there, but anyone is welcome, and we always have a good time here learning a little bit about sound each week. So for this week, we're going to cover ear training again. We did this a few months ago, and I think it's time to come back and challenge ourselves again. So we'll start with EQ and compression, get our ears used to hearing what that all sounds like again, and maybe do some slightly more challenging audio samples here. And then we do have a question that was submitted ahead of time. In fact, I want to cover that first because that was a question here from Dan. I just have to summarize. It's quite a long question, so I just want to summarize it here. So Dan is presenting. It looks like there is an audience at a community center with a it sounds like kind of a makeshift PA system, public address system. And then he is operating from, it sounds like, home. He's got a Shure MV7, a Rodecaster, headphones, and so they set up a virtual call and he was doing a presentation, and whenever he talked, it would echo in the room. He would hear it back. And then likewise, there was some really awful reverb in the room itself, or some perhaps feedback. So Dan, the short answer is that when you are talking at the community center, they should be muted. And then likewise, when they are talking there, I think you're wearing headphones, so you probably don't need to worry about that. But if you were playing speakers or listening through speakers in your space, then you would want to mute while they are doing that. There is, on some services, I can't remember the name of the service you're using. It was not StreamYard, it was something else. But if they do have an echo cancellation, you can try that. Nevertheless, if you're going to be presenting for a period of time, I would coordinate with them to mute on their end, especially if they're just using a PC microphone, because those are usually omnidirectional. It's going to pick up everything. And the chances of that, since they're using that kind of as a PA system as well, the chances of feedback are pretty bad too. So it's going to be an awful listening experience for the people there, unless they mute on their end while you're presenting. So that'd be my first recommendation. You can also try that echo cancellation feature and see how that works. But hopefully that gets you to a better spot, and next presentation goes a little bit more smoothly from an audio perspective. So thanks for that question. Okay, we are going to go back and we are going to do some ear training. Now, what's the purpose of all this? Why do we do ear training? And this is specifically for dialogue. If you can attune your ears to nuance when it comes to audio, listening back to dialogue, spoken word audio, you can solve problems a lot faster. And when you get into, if you're doing any sort of post-production work, you can tune in the sound that you want much more quickly. You can prevent yourself from over-compressing or over-EQing something. And so what we're doing here is just, again, getting our ears used to that whole experience. It's not meant as a trick. Nobody's going to send a report card to your parents. This is just for us to get better, all of us to get better at listening to dialogue audio with different processing applied. So let's go ahead and do that. And the way this is going to work is just like last time. I would encourage you in the chat, when you hear the sample, when I start playing a sample, I'm going to switch back and forth. So when I have my hand up like this, the processing, whatever processing I've applied, is turned off. When I go like this, with my finger up, the processing is turned on. 0, processing off. 1, processing on. Okay, so I'll switch back and forth because that makes it a lot easier for you to hear the difference. And what you're going to do is you're going to guess what kind of processing I've applied. Now, I'll give you a hint. We're going to start with EQ, and we are going to do subtractive EQ. That means we're only going to cut. We're not going to boost anything. Okay, so with that, here we go. Let me actually just get things all set up here. Okay, we are going to start right here. Now. Oh, give me just a second. So I had to restart the camera. And now it looks like the sound is coming out of the wrong thing. So we're going to start DaVinci Resolve again. We're playing back from DaVinci Resolve. So if you'll give me just a moment here. Restarting DaVinci Resolve, pulling up our project. There we go. Okay, now let's just test that and see if that's working.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've, yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Fallingwater when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago.
Okay, so there's our first sample. Go ahead and put in the chat what you think I did there as far as subtractive EQ. In other words, what frequency we cut at, or did we use a high pass filter, a low pass filter, did we cut a specific frequency? Give us your best guess there. Crazy Sheep Film says 125 to 250 hertz reduced. Okay. Derek Hooper, nasal dip at 100 hertz. Good guess. Zach Schwartz cut 300 hertz. I'm proud of you all. Well, 102.3 hertz. Good. I'm glad you're being very specific, Derek. Thank you. Low frequency cut. Good. That's from Geezer to Tech. All right, let's go ahead and switch on over to the Mac and I'll show you exactly what we did here. Okay, so this is a high pass filter.
We have another.
Oh, wait, we have some more guesses. Gain on 300 hertz. Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. All right. So what we actually had here.
Oh, we have more.
We have more. They're trickling in. High pass filter at around 300 hertz. Oh, that's so good, Geezer to Tech. Shoji Productions, 100 to 200 hertz cut. Another good one.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to call it. Keep guessing. This is just for us, each of us individually, to get better at listening and figuring things out. No report cards are going out afterwards. This was actually a high pass filter at 307 hertz. So you'll notice that when I turned it on, when I had my finger up and it was on, the dialogue sounded much thinner. Emma's voice sounded much more nasally, and it was missing some of the low-end body to it. And then when I turned it off, you heard the actual raw recording, which included a little bit more of that low end, some of that richness, and actually, honestly, some of the room as well. The room was giving a little bit of there was some reverb there for sure. So it was adding something there as well. So let me just go ahead and play that again here. We can go ahead and leave this on the screen at this point.
With lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass.
It's on.
So not like the old kind. Lots of
Off.
Kind of stained glass.
old kind of stained glass, yeah.
Okay.
Not like a painting in glass, but like very geometric. A different play of space and line and shape and color than you usually see.
Got it.
And that was very interesting. I did not become an architect because of that, but it did foster a strong interest in design and aesthetic.
Okay. So notice there, when we had it off, there was more body to the lower frequencies in her voice. Honestly, it sounded a little more balanced. It definitely sounded like it was in a room. When we added that high pass filter at just over 300 hertz, a lot of that low end disappeared. It didn't sound quite as roomy, but it also sounded a little bit more nasally, a little bit more like AM radio. So that's what we were listening for here. That was a pretty, it's good to be able to recognize that very quickly. And so that's exactly what we had going there. Okay, let me just reconfigure things here. I'm going to go ahead and turn my equalizer back on. I'm going to apologize for any beeping. We got like 8 inches of snow last night, and there's some snow removal going on out there. Let me just turn that low cut off, or the high pass filter off, and I'm going to add another EQ. Again, this will be subtractive EQ, so we're cutting. We're not boosting. We're cutting. And let's do this one.
Do you want me to show the computer?
No. This is secret, top
Oh, I
secret.
thought
You're
you
not
were
allowed to
talking about
see
what you were
this. I don't want anyone to see this yet.
Yeah, but you said what you were doing.
I am going to just choose a frequency. Okay, here we go.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've
The architect.
yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. So not like the old kind. Lots of
kind of stained glass.
old kind of stained glass, yeah. Not like a painting in glass, but like very geometric. A different play of space and line and shape and color than you usually see.
Got it.
And that was very interesting. I did not become an architect because of that, but it did foster a strong interest in design and aesthetic.
Okay. All right, go ahead and put your guesses and your answer in the chat here, and we'll take a look at those in just a moment. That one was a little bit more, I don't know if I was subtle, but we'll see. Rag and Bone Puppet Theater says mid-range cut.
Oh, wait, you know what?
Okay.
That was, I think, from before.
No, I think that's new. Derek says 10,000 hertz. Okay. 4 kilohertz cut, Crazy Sheep Film says. Very good. Cut lower than 100 hertz. Okay, good guess. Cut at 2 kilohertz, Zach. Thank you for that. Cut at around 2 kilohertz, Steve. If you're having trouble, make sure you're wearing the best headphones you have available to you. That'll make it a little easier to hear. When you're doing critical listening, I find that headphones are actually usually kind of the better choice. Mark says a 2 kilohertz cut. Very good. Some of you might have real-time analyzers running on the show, and so it'll be... I think I mixed the on and off. Yes, I think you did. So this is on, and this is off. On, off. Geezer to Tech, high pass roll off at about 4,000 hertz. Okay. Cut at 1 kilohertz, Mark Greenberg says. Billy Elliott, 3 dB cut at 1 kilohertz. Wow, okay. High cut at 2 kilohertz. Interesting. Red Frame Tech. Shoji says cut at between 1 and 2 kilohertz. Okay. Good. All right, let's go switch over to the Mac and let's show you exactly what we had going here. This was a 6.9 dB cut at 1500 hertz, 1500 hertz, or between 1 and 2 kilohertz. So that's exactly what you were hearing here. Definitely a mid-range cut. The interesting thing about EQ is that when you cut one frequency, remember you're just pulling down the level, if you will, on that in that particular frequency range. Other frequencies start to sound more prominent. So when you cut in the middle, sometimes the low frequencies in particular sound more prominent. It almost sounds like you've boosted the low frequencies, but you actually haven't. You've cut the mid frequencies. The same can happen to the very high frequencies. You're not going to notice quite as much of that in voice unless you have really, really good ears and really good headphones and a really good recording. But that was definitely a mid-range cut. And a lot of times if you're in a situation where you find that the dialogue audio that you're working with, whether it's live or in post-production, if it sounds really kind of harsh or shrill, I would say more harsh. If it sounds harsh as kind of this harsh character to it, I would start with a cut somewhere between maybe 900 hertz and somewhere up to 2,500 hertz, kind of sweep back and forth between there and see what you can find that helps kind of smooth it out. Now, a 6.9 dB cut is quite a lot. I wouldn't normally recommend that in most cases unless you have a really awful recording, but usually even a 3 dB cut can be really nice at mellowing out that harshness. And so that's a really good one to keep in your arsenal of things to try. Okay, so let's come on back to the main camera here. We'll go ahead and reset this here.
Oh, somebody would like to hear it again.
Okay, let's hear it again on and off. Okay, let me do a minus 6.9
Do you want me to show?
dB cut. Yeah, you can show it. Yep, that's totally fine. Okay, so here it is. It's band number 3 in this case. We're at 1.5 kilohertz or 1,500 hertz, cut of 6.9 dB. And I will turn it on and off up here. When you see the orange dot go away, it's off. When the orange dot is there, it's on. So here we go.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've,
The architect.
yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. So not like the old kind.
Okay. Hopefully that makes sense there. So it got a little bit more kind of, it ended up sounding a little bit warmer once we made that cut and even a little bit woolly to my ears. In other words, it was a little woofy. It started to sound, had a lot of low end and not enough articulation. So that was an extreme cut, almost 7 dB. Normally I wouldn't cut that far to manage harshness unless it's really, really bad. But in any case, that's again, a really good one to know. Hopefully that makes sense here. I'm going to go ahead and reset that one. And let's choose another one here. You got it. You got it, Geezer to Tech. Absolutely. Okay. Are we ready? Remember, this means the processing is on. This means the processing is off. And here we go.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've,
The architect.
yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. So not like the old kind. Lots of
Old kind of stained glass.
old kind of stained glass, yeah.
Okay.
Not like a painting in glass, but like very geometric. A different play of space and line and shape and color than you usually see.
Got it.
And that was very interesting. I did not become an architect because of that, but it did foster a strong interest in design and aesthetic.
All right. Let's go ahead and put your answers there in the chat, and we will show you what we did here in just a moment.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, here they come. 200 hertz cut, Derek says. Okay. 4 kilohertz cut. Okay. Roll off at 4 kilohertz, Steve says. Cut 6K, monitoring on my new JBL 104 BT speakers. Oh, very good. Hope those are going to work well for you, Zach. Crazy Sheep Films, or even higher than 4 kilohertz. Okay. Low pass filter, cut at 4K. Very good, Mark. Cut at 800 hertz. Very good. 4 kilohertz cut at around 4 kilohertz. Okay. Roll off at 5 kilohertz. Okay. So when people are saying roll off, if that's not a term that you're familiar with, oh, there's some more coming.
There's a whole bunch.
Whole bunch more. Low pass at 5 kilohertz. Okay. Thanks, Mike. And stay warm, by the way, Mike. Sounds very cold there. And same for you, Christopher. Let's see. Cut about 3,000 hertz, Geezer to Tech says. Okay, good. Christopher says low pass filter nuking the high end, making it very muffled sounding. Okay, good, good. Cut at 3 kilohertz from Mark. Billy, cut around 4 to 5 kilohertz. Red Frame Tech, 4 kilohertz cut. Good, good. All right. So when people are talking about a roll-off, so a roll-off, just like when we did the very first one, that was a high-pass filter. So what we're doing is essentially we're rolling off. That's another way of saying the same thing. We're rolling off the low frequencies in that case. You can also roll off the high frequencies. And in fact, that's exactly what we did here. So for those of you that guessed either a low-pass filter or a high roll-off, that's exactly what we did. So let's head on over to the Mac and show you what we've got here. So we did a massive, this was a massive, you notice it when it was on that Emma essentially had a lisp. So we definitely took care of any sibilance issues, but we went the other direction and created a lisp instead. So we had a 1,800 hertz low pass filter or a high roll off, however you want to say that. Same thing. Again, at 1,800 hertz. So, and to Christopher's point, we basically did obliterate the high end. So that was a pretty extreme cut there. Not normally something you'd want to do. If you're having sometimes a low pass filter can be helpful up at higher frequencies, and oftentimes for even in post-production dialogue sound, if I'm going to be mixing in dialogue with some other sound design elements or perhaps some music, especially, I don't hesitate to kind of roll off certainly around like 16, 17 kilohertz, just to kind of clean that area up so there's plenty of room for any music or other sound effects elements up there. Again, most adults can't hear above 17 kilohertz. Some can. The lucky ones can, but it's going to be the younger generation for the largest part that can hear those. So that's exactly what we did. So again, that was 1,800 hertz. Let's go ahead and play that back again here with the screen on, and you'll be able to see exactly. So we were at 1,800 hertz right here. Again, when the orange dot is on, that means the low pass filter is engaged. And then when it's gray, it is not engaged. So we're getting the original sound when it's gray. Okay, so here we go again.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've, yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. So not like the old kind.
Old kind of stained glass.
Old kind of stained glass, yeah.
Okay.
Not like a painting in glass, but like very geometric. A different play of space and line and shape and color than you usually see.
Okay, so hopefully that's really clear or clearer to you now. Again, if you're having any trouble, make sure you listen back on the best speakers or headphones you can. I find that headphones are especially useful in these kind of cases where you're trying to hear really kind of delicate nuance. So definitely something to listen to here. Can you compare that to the high pass filter you did first, Curtis Jet Audio? A, be it please. Okay, let's do that. Let me get the high pass filter set back up. We had that at around 300 hertz, as I recall, 307 to be exact. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's switch back on over to the Mac. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn the equalizer on, and what I'm going to do is let's turn these others off just so they're out. So when they are orange, they are engaged, orange or red, or reddish orange. So this will be the low pass filter, and this will be the high pass filter. Okay, so you'll be able to hear the two of those. I'm going to switch back between them like this, so you'll hear each of them. So with that, let's go.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've
The architect.
yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of falling water when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. So not like the old kind. Lots of
kind of stained glass.
old kind of stained glass, yeah. Not like a painting in glass, but like very geometric. A different play of space and line and shape and color than you usually see.
Got it.
And that was very interesting. I did not become an architect because of that, but it did foster a strong interest in design and aesthetic.
Okay. So hopefully that gives you some context there as we listen back to the two of those, as we switch back and forth between the low pass filter that rolls off the high frequencies and the high pass filter that rolls off the low frequencies. It's kind of, I know it can be confusing at first. When you first hear high pass, you're like, oh, that's cutting the stuff. No. High pass it's rolling off the low frequencies and letting the high frequencies pass through the filter, just if that's confusing. And a high pass, by the way, a high pass and a low cut, same thing, different names for our purposes here. Okay, so that was pretty good. Good job, everybody. Good job sticking with it and challenging yourselves here. Let's go ahead and I'm going to... We have a comment here from Mark. Showing the effect on a real-time analyzer might be helpful to graphically represent the change. One of the things I love about FabFilter Q3. So yes, so for those that aren't familiar, FabFilter makes a series of plugins, including an equalizer, and it also has a real-time analyzer on it. So you can see as you make changes on the equalizer, you can get a visual, you can see it visually affect the audio on a real-time analyzer. Real-time analyzer is showing you the amount or the level that you're getting in the audio at each frequency. So you've seen those charts dancing around before. I think that's a good idea. I also want to avoid it because I want to make sure that we're ear training here. I think it's a good exercise and we should do it at some point. I'm not really set up for it right now, but actually I probably do have one installed here. But I want to make sure the kind of one of the things that I find over time is I have this tendency to very much rely on visual analyzers and visual feedback to make audio decisions. And I think there's some danger to that. I've had to kind of untrain myself from a little bit of that. I think they can be useful tools, don't get me wrong, but I think it's important also to train your ears so that you can just hear those differences and be able to make the judgment based on your ears. And you'll hear there are a lot of engineers that will say, you have to use your ears. That's what it comes down to. You have to use your ears. And I think certainly when I was getting started, I relied on the visual cues a lot. I still look at them. I still find them useful in certain circumstances. So for example, if I'm trying to find some harshness and I pull up a real-time analyzer and I see, there's this massive hump here around 1.2 kilohertz, that gives me a cue and I can quickly go to 1.2 kilohertz and start cutting there and see what happens. Again, using my ears at that point to make sure that that's getting better and not worse. So yeah, it's a good point. Definitely worth trying. Okay. Now it's time to do some compression. So let's pull up our compressor here. I am going to do different types of compression. And as a start, we'll just make it pretty straightforward. What we're looking for here is to assess whether we're doing heavy compression, moderate compression, or no compression. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. Your answer is going to be one of those three: heavy compression, moderate compression, no compression. So with that, let me go ahead and get set up here. And you're going to tell me whether this is heavy, moderate, or no compression. Okay. So here we go.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So
The architect.
Yes, the architect. the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. So not like the old kind. Lots of
Old kind of stained glass.
old kind of stained glass, yeah. Not like a painting in glass, but like very geometric. A different play of space and line and shape and color than you usually see.
Got it.
And that was very interesting. I did not become an architect because of that, but it did foster a strong interest in design and aesthetic.
Okay. All right, go ahead and put your answers in the chat. Mark says heavy compression. Crazy Sheep Film says heavy compression. Geezer Detect heavy. Derek icky. Pretty aggressive heavy. Yes. Dave Datura heavy. Red Frame Tech heavy. Heavy compression from Mark. Does anyone think it might be moderate compression? It's heavy compression, definitely. Heavy radio compression from Shoji. Yes, indeed. Let's go ahead and head on over to the Mac and show you what we had going there. So one of the things you'll notice, it was especially obvious at the start because I hadn't set the makeup gain yet. But let me just kind of talk through what we did here. So we have this really extreme threshold. And the threshold is currently set to minus 31 dB. So that means any of the audio that exceeds, it goes louder than minus 31 dB, the compressor kicks in. We're not using an especially extreme ratio. It's a 2.8 to 1. So in essence, about every 3 dB that makes it over the threshold gets compressed down to 1 in concept. We're using a soft knee, so it should be a little bit smoother. And indeed, it was smoother, I guess, for heavy compression. We're using a 1.5 or 1.4 millisecond attack time, so it attacks pretty quickly. It grabs onto the audio signal pretty quickly and gets to the full compression ratio quite quickly after the audio goes above the threshold, so that's good. And then it releases at about 140 milliseconds, so kind of a moderate release for dialogue, I would say. You can do faster releases, do even longer ones too. I find that the longer releases tend to emphasize some of the breaths between words, especially for people that have aggressive breaths, like louder breaths, like me. But anyway, that is what we had going on now. Now, what would make that less extreme? And actually, what I want to do here is I want to actually leave it on the screen this time while we're doing the compression and have you watch what I'm doing. So I'm mainly going to be changing this threshold here. I think that's the biggest thing that we can change here and still hear a difference. I'm going to go ahead and reset the makeup gain. I pulled that back down. What I was trying to do before is when I was playing it back before, we were doing so much compression that I added back 7, almost 8 dB of additional gain after the compression, just so that when I switched it on and off, it wouldn't be massively different volume levels or loudness levels. But I'm going to go ahead and reset that for now. We'll adjust it as I'm doing this. But the two things I'm going to adjust are the threshold to a more sane level, so we'll get some moderate compression instead of heavy compression. And then I'll adjust the makeup gain as well. So again, the idea behind compression is to start to, I generally tastefully and moderately manage the dynamic range of the spoken word audio. That's the main idea. And when you do that, that gives you the opportunity to maybe boost the levels a little bit in either in post-production or even in live production. So once you kind of manage some of those higher amplitude parts of the audio waveform, then you can actually boost the overall levels a little bit more because that gives you more headroom. So in other words, when the amplitude gets high, it's going to actually push that down some, and then you can take the overall levels and boost them up some. So let's go ahead and see how that works. And here we go.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright.
Before I do that, let me explain something. This blue little meter that kind of pops down from the top. That's showing how much gain reduction we're doing. And we were doing somewhere between 10 and 14 dB of gain reduction, which is a massive amount of gain reduction for spoken word audio. Maybe for drums, there might be times when you want to do something like that and other musical instruments, but for spoken word audio, it's going to be very, very obvious and generally not what you want to do. Okay, here we go again.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've,
The architect.
yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. So not like the old kind. Lots of
Old kind of stained glass.
old kind of stained glass, yeah. Not like a painting in glass, but like very geometric. A different play of space and line and shape and color than you usually see.
Got it.
And that was very interesting. I did not become an architect because of that, but it did foster a strong interest in design and aesthetic.
Okay. So hopefully you saw what we did there. So the biggest thing we did is we dropped our threshold to, in the end, to minus 9.8. We were doing somewhere around minus 3 dB of gain reduction. Not all the time, but especially at the kind of the start of the sentences and some of the more emphasized words when Emma was talking there. And then overall, once we did that, we were able to boost our levels up about 3 dB, 3.5 dB, to kind of make it more present and manage those dynamics a little bit. This is what I would call more moderate compression here. And I kind of switched it on and off so you could hear the difference between them. So you noticed, and we can do this again in just a second here, but you'll notice when I turn the compression and the makeup gain off, it was actually a little bit quieter. But once we turned the compression on with the additional 3.5 dB of makeup gain, it was overall louder. So what we're doing again in those cases is just switch back to the main camera really quickly here. So we're taking the part of the audio that has its high amplitude, the kind of the momentary louder parts, and we're mashing them down a little bit. And then overall, once we've done that, we can take that gives us headroom here between 0 dB and where we're at, and we can push the overall loudness up like that. So that's to a large extent what we're typically doing with compression and spoken word audio. So let's go ahead and switch back to the Mac and let me just again illustrate that. I'll turn it on and off so you can hear what it sounds like with the moderate compression and without.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've,
The architect.
yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. So not like the old kind. Lots
Old
of
kind of stained glass.
old kind of stained glass, yeah. Not like a painting in glass, but like very geometric. A different play of space and line and shape and color than you usually see.
Got it.
And that was very interesting. I did not become an architect because of that, but it did foster a strong interest in design and aesthetic.
Okay. So hopefully that's become clear to you. It's a little bit more subtle when you're doing it just by ear in this case. Between on and off of the moderate compression here, kind of mild to moderate, I think is probably closer to moderate compression here for spoken word audio. But it's just something that over time you'll start to get that. You'll start to be able to hear it. And I don't know how better to describe it than just to practice a whole lot. Turn it on and off and see how, listen to how it sounds different. And again, there can be visual things here that can help, but again, it's if you can get it to a point where you can make the detection, you can notice it by ear, then that is super, super powerful. And it really kind of unlocks you to be able to make changes. And especially if you're doing live sound, but also if you're doing post-production, to be able to kind of zero in on what you need to do more quickly and get it sounding exactly how you want it to sound. So with that, let's switch back on over and let's head to the chat and see what's going on out in the chat here. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick.
I'm going to do the more recent ones first.
Okay, Danny's going to do the more recent one first, and we'll work our way back.
More recent ones.
More recent ones, okay. Shoji, other than just using your ears, do you use any objective methods to determine if you've gone too far with dialogue EQ and compression? I think the biggest, like I said, yeah, I do use visual, like a real-time analyzer. Let's actually just see if we have a real-time analyzer here in Resolve. If it has, give me just a moment here. Turn the media pool off. Oh, I've got FabFilter. So let's go ahead and turn FabFilter Pro Q on. Do I have Pro Q? There's a de-esser. Well, I've got the the compressor is here. And I can use that. So we can just drop it on this clip. And when I play this back, watch what happens here. Whoops.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've,
The architect.
yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, I don't know, 10 or so. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass.
Okay, so let me explain what I just showed here. So this is actually a multi-band compressor that we showed up, but what you saw in the background, and all this is superimposed over that, the background was a real-time analyzer showing you the levels of each of the frequencies in real time as the audio played back. So the lower frequencies, of course, represented over here on the left, the higher frequencies over here on the right. And we can actually, I mean, this is like a surgeon's scalpel. It's this particular tool because you can compress just certain frequencies if you choose to do that. And that's to a large extent, for example, that's how de-essers work. If you want to de-ess something, if you want to take care of some sibilance, you're really kind of targeting a specific frequency, and you really only need to compress that one frequency so that it's not standing out so much above the rest. But that's an example. I don't have the EQ here. I don't see it at least installed. I haven't been using it here. So you can get a similar type thing on the EQ plugin where it's showing you the real-time analyzer in the background. But as I say, Shoji, that I use those to help solve problems, but I prefer to trust my ears when I can. Again, in the end, it's how it sounds. It's the most important thing. And yeah, sometimes I'll use the visual things just to kind of a sanity check. I think the biggest sanity check, to be honest, is to take your headphones off and go away for at least 15 minutes and come back and put them back on and listen. And also to listen to reference tracks. So if there is for example, if there's a podcast, you're trying to achieve a similar type of sound to their podcast, play their podcast, pause it, come back and listen to your audio, and see how it differs. Hearing things right next to each other is one of the best ways to hear differences and to be able to detect potential issues. So those are the kind of things that I actually prefer. The real-time analyzer is absolutely a useful tool, not my number one choice. Danny says, quit talking about that and move on. Audio Buff says, ear fatigue is a real thing, and it's extremely easy to overcompress an EQ. The in-out button is a great way to see if you've helped the mix or have heard it, and taking an ear break helps. 100% agree, Audio Buff. In audio, it's all about managing time, energy, and frequency. That's a good way to think about it. Robert says, I dislike modern digital EQ because I find that I have a tendency to paint pretty EQ pictures. I prefer knobs because it allows me to close my eyes and listen for the changes. I think that's not a bad approach at all. Curtis, are we going to see any pictures of this stained glass? I would suggest, I don't have any of them ready, and I also don't want to create any copyright concerns here on the stream, but if you do a search for Frank Lloyd Wright stained glass, I'm sure you'll find what you're looking for. Crazy Sheep Films asks a really, really good question. Why do I like it without the compressor? Compressor makes it sound more forward. That is a brilliant thing. Actually, let me answer it. Danny says it's 3 parts, I think, or multiple parts. Maybe I'm off here. I always compress. I record at -18 or -12 and max it around -5, 3, then compress to get to -3. Yet the uncompressed sounds nice. That's a great point. So in real life, we're used to hearing things uncompressed for the most part. It sounds more natural generally. And in fact, if you go back to the broadcast television days, and even a lot of the streaming shows, I've noticed, they're not compressed that heavily. Some parts are. Definitely some of the sound design is absolutely compressed, and some of the movies definitely compressed. But like a drama, for example, will often be normalized to -23 LUFS, and they don't have to do a lot of compression in most cases to get it to that perceived loudness target. And so they don't necessarily do a lot of compression. And that's okay. If you know that your audience is going to be listening back on decent audio quality, decent playback devices, whether that be quality headphones, in a theater, at the very least at home watching their television, instead of in a car, on an airplane, in a subway, it's a lot easier to be able to retain that dynamic range and produce something that sounds a little bit more natural. Now, there's a lot going on too. I don't want to get into that rabbit hole. We can come back to it, but we can talk about YouTube loudness as well if we choose to at the end. Okay. Do I hear more of the room acoustics in the compressed sound? I think so. I think it's, let's try. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Turn the compressor back on. And here we go.
Well, I think first on my list, and actually also chronologically, would be Frank Lloyd Wright. So I've, yes, the architect, the famous American. So of course, like many people, I first became aware of Falling Water when I was, 10 or so. Mm-hmm. And then I don't remember specifically looking at his work, but just in general architecture literature, there were some mentions of some of his other work as well, including one very interesting mid-century or earlier house in Chicago with lots of wood finish and Art Deco stained glass. Mm-hmm. So not like the old kind.
To answer your question, I would agree. I do think you definitely hear more of the room ambiance. You hear more of the reflected audio. So that's one of the things with compression is that compression is a useful tool. It can make it sound more closer, more intimate, more in your face if you're going for that sound, if you want more of an action movie in your face sound. But it also is going to boost these other things. So you have a lot of other jobs then you have to take care of if you don't want that additional room ambiance necessarily. So yeah, there are some downsides to compressing. It's a challenging thing. You can also use light compression where you're just trying to manage even less than we're doing here, and you're going to get a little bit less of that. All right, Steve says, excellent real-time demo makes compression much easier to understand. Thanks, Steve. Glad we could do this today. When you're working with dialogue compression, what is your objective? The improvement you're looking to achieve? Voice presence, leveling, other. For YouTube, it's generally going to be loudness and voice presence, and leveling comes right along with that. So usually that's what I'm looking for. If I'm mixing a film, that's a completely different thing. With a film, if you're just going to be, especially if it's a drama and not an action film, a lot of times with the dialogue, I'm not necessarily going to do much compression. So I want it to, instead, I'll choose to use compression when I want a specific sound as opposed to trying to achieve a loudness target necessarily. So that's how I usually approach it. If you want something to sound more in your face, more present, more, if you want an explosion to sound like it has more impact, that's when compression definitely has some things. But as far as voice, if I do want it to sound very in your face, again, that's when I'd start to do some compression. It's a great question. And it's where there's so much nuance, so much art. These sessions are just awesome. Thank you so much, Derek. Thanks for being a part of it. It's really helpful to have everyone's involvement and participation to make them awesome. So thanks for that. Mike, seems like some noise reduction plugins seem to roll off about 15 kilohertz. Waves Clarity, for example. Have you noticed this? Yeah, I think they're going to generally be a lot more aggressive up in the higher frequencies because the way most of those, I don't know exactly how Waves Clarity VX works, but at least the traditional noise reduction plugins are actually a bunch of noise gates, or they're basically noise gates at different frequencies. And as soon as it detects, okay, the person stopped talking, it kicks the noise gate in, and then it pulls it back off as soon as the person starts talking again. And it operates at a whole bunch of different frequencies. So I think in the case of iZotope RX voice denoise, for example, I think it has something like 255 different frequency noise gates. So each noise gate is given a different frequency to work at, and they work really, really fast. So even as one person is pronouncing a word, there are certain parts of the word that will not have this frequency, and so that noise gate may kick in to try and reduce the noise there. So that's the kind of general idea. And yeah, definitely you're gonna find that some of the higher frequencies in particular get attenuated because they're generally going to be considered noise. Sound compressed, brain expanded. Good. That is awesome. Now, while we're on the topic, are there more? Yes, lots more. Okay, we're going to the more. We've got just a few minutes here. Christopher, I find it interesting that I'm using Resolve Fairlight as his DAW for these demos instead of Audition, or maybe even iZotope RX standalone. Good to see you using Fairlight for this. Wondering if you use it in your production. At work, we're still using mostly RX, and we do actually a little bit of audio processing in Premiere as well. So for my YouTube work, we're doing mostly RX, and then that's basically it. Derek, got my deity Theos this past week. Many thanks for all the help. Contemplated sound devices in Shure, and in the end ended up with the deity and couldn't be happier. That's wonderful to hear, Derek. I'm so glad. Hope they continue to work well for you and get you the great sound that you're looking for. Matt says, have you seen the size of the wireless mic in the new Hollyland Lark M2? Will you be doing a review? I have not seen it. Is it tiny? I imagine it's probably tiny is my guess. No plans for a review at the moment. I've got some other things that I'm working on as far as wireless microphones are concerned, though, so stay tuned for those. Okay, 2, Danny says. I can get a Fairlight Evo console from 2017 with 10 modules for 5,000 euros. New price was 13,500 euros. It has Maddie, not Dante, so my question is about a comparison. Plan is to offer services around the internet via remote. Just some thinking around of it. Wow, that's really high end. And yeah, so for those that aren't familiar, the console that Daniela is talking about is basically a big, I don't know exactly how that one's configured, Daniela, but it's a big console that you would normally see in a re-recording studio, a re-recording theater. And it has a whole bunch of different faders. It has all the controls. It's basically like a combination physical and digital version of what we have in Fairlight in the software version. I think that's amazing. My thoughts are, I wish you all the best. I'm a little bit envious, and I hope you'll share with us what your experience is with the Fairlight console. Would love to hear about it. Christopher, speaking of EQ and compression, are you still using your Shelford channel at all now, or just doing it in the Mackie DLZ? So today we're using a Mackie DLZ. There was within the last 4 weeks we have used the Shelford channel, so we go back and forth. Yeah, everything gets a little bit of use from time to time around here. Depends partly on what the show is and whether I need to bring another mic in for Danny, which Danny has a mic today, by the way.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well. If you have snow, oh, yeah, I'm too close, aren't I?
Probably a little.
Probably. Sorry about that.
All good. All
Every
good.
week is a different mic, so Curtis keeps me on my toes.
Absolutely. All right. Sheriff Log says, do you use multiple compressors to compress dialogue or use one compressor to do the heavy lifting? And what about using analog bus processing like SSL glue compressor? Oh my. So this is a much deeper question. If you have a multi-person scene or podcast or group discussion or something like that, where each person has their own microphone, I will typically use a bus compressor of some sort, or in the case of something like, say, a Rodecaster Pro, you have the new version, at least the 2, you have a compeller, which is basically the way they've implemented it, it's basically like a bus compressor, sort of. But yeah, so if I'm doing multiple people, then yeah, I'll use this secondary compressor. That's going to catch situations. First of all, it's going to help the overall mixed sound a little bit more, well, as SSL calls it, their glue compressor. It makes it sound more coherent, more like everyone is very much in the same space, in the same realm. It kind of glues the mix together, if you will. So it's useful for that. It's also useful certainly in live shows if you have a group laughing all at the same time, that gets very loud, and having that kind of last compressor to help manage that. So you may have compressors on the individual inputs that'll manage some of that, but then you also, once you combine, 3 people laughing loudly at the same time, you sum all that up and it gets pretty loud, and so you have to manage that with another compressor as well. So yeah, definitely do some of that. Always here to stay away from multiband compressors for dialogue. Thoughts? I think they can be done. I think multiband compressors are a lot more complex, and I find I have used them in the past for dialogue on sibilant voices where I want to compress the high frequencies differently than the low frequencies. I actually hear some other people say the inverse of that. They don't want to use a single band compressor for dialogue because they may not want the dialogue to sound really bassy. So they may actually roll off some of the bass at the start, apply one threshold for the low frequencies, and then have a second threshold for the higher frequencies. So it's a much more advanced topic than we covered here today. Obviously, we're just kind of talking about the basics of compression. What I would say is if you're getting started, probably stick with a single band compressor. And then once you get a really good ear for that, then it's time to start experimenting with multiband.
I like this one.
Still looking for the Sanity Check plugin. Well, the Sanity Check plugin, there actually is one from iZotope. Matt says chocolate helps. I concur, Doctor. I do think chocolate helps as well, but iZotope makes a referencing plugin of some sort where you can have reference audio clips kind of loaded in, and you can A/B between your audio and the reference clip or track, so you can hear them back and forth, and that is basically the Sanity Check. And again, you're using your ears at that point, so you can hear the difference quite clearly when you switch back and forth between them. I don't remember what it's called. I think there was a free version for a while. I don't know if it's free still, but definitely worth checking out.
There's just lots of interesting stuff going on, so everybody make sure to check the chat.
Okay. Crazy Sheep, thank you. And Donald Mackley, I hope I didn't say that, Mackley. I hope you help. I think you helped me to solve a problem I have in one of my productions. Whoops, I didn't get through all of that.
Oh.
We will have to see, but I'm going to try it. Record louder, less compression. Very good. Okay. I'm glad it helped, by the way. Also, you can just boost the levels without compressing. If you've got enough headroom, you don't have to do compression.
I I think this is the dose of the chocolate.
Size of a quarter, a little smaller, and about 3/8 inches thick. Is that referring to the chocolate?
I don't know. I think so.
Speaking of Deity Theos, they released news of their DLTX 3-pin LEMO transmitter. Oh, very good. I don't know what the latest is there. I thought it was going to ship at some point Q1 this year, but I haven't heard more. So thanks for the update, Mark. I'll have to go check that out. My sanity check plugin would just turn the computer off for 10 minutes. That's actually not a bad idea. Andrew says, I have a 2-person interview and as a backup want to put a boom microphone in between them. Which microphone would you recommend? Probably a cardioid pencil condenser of some sort. It's a decent one is the Rode NT5. There's a lot of, I mean, you can go well up from there. It's like a $220 microphone, if I recall right. But there are lots of other options too. Okay. Oh, Danny says time. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming by today, for being engaged and training your ears with us. Get out there, make some great sound, and we will talk to you again soon. Take care.